So this will be the first video lecture about our target lesson for the subject assessment in learning 1. So we'll be talking about qualities, important qualities that are needed in an assessment classroom instrument. And one of the most important quality that we need to have in our classroom assessment instrument is its validity. So when we talk about validity, it is actually the degree to which the test measures what is supposed or intend to measure. When we are conducting validity tests in our classroom instrument, we will be using a scoring guide or maybe a rating scale, of which indicators with regards to validity indicators are embedded or are displayed or display in the assessment instrument for content validation or for validity test of a classroom test instrument. So what is supposed to be measured in an exam? So we need to make sure that all the outcomes, all the objectives, educational objectives that we display in our lesson plan should be assessed. All right, should be assessed. Now take note that if you place an item which is irrelevant to the course outcome or to the course outline that you have discussed and you want to assess, then that item will be considered to be irrelevant. Next, there are actually types of validation techniques that we can derive. One of which is the phase validity, which is the most basic method in checking the validity of an assessment instrument. So we often called it as logical validity. So it is a simple form of validity where you apply a superficial and subjective assessment of whether or not your study or test measures what it is supposed to measure. So as I said, it is the easiest way of validity. However, it doesn't general include much in the way of objective measurement. Though phase validity is considered to be the weakest form of validity, it can be useful as an initial way in checking the overall validity of the instrument. We can check the font size, the positioning of pictures or figures represented in the assessment instrument, or maybe the organization of the items. So by simply checking the physical appearance, we can do it through phase validation. Another method is the content validation. Is the test fully representative of what it aims to measure? So that will be our guiding question as to content validity is concerned. It assesses whether a test is representative of all aspects of the construct. To produce a valid result, the content of test survey or measurement method must cover all relevant parts of the subject it aims to measure. It is important to note that if some aspects are missing from the measurement, the validity is threatened. Alright? So please take note on that. I repeat, if some aspects are missing from the measurement, the validity is threatened. Say, for example, in your examination instrument, your goal is to assess a student's ability to explain different principles related to instructional strategies in teaching. However, based on the given exam, the items that deals with classroom management, of which it is known to be different area in the principles of teaching course, in this case we can say that the instrument will produce a very high index of validity. or will not produce, sorry for that, will not produce a very high index of validity. Another example is a mathematics teacher develops an end of semester algebra test of her student, or of her class. The test should cover every form of algebra that was taught in class. If some types of algebra are left out, then the results may not be accurate, or an accurate indication of students' understanding on the subject. Similarly, if she includes questions that are not related to algebra, the results are no longer valid measure of algebra knowledge. So content validity is established by constructing table of specification. What does it mean? If we prepare a table of specification before constructing a test, it means we are trying to distribute, we are trying to know or identify the expected lesson that has been on process or tackled, which is included or displayed in the TOS. So ang ibig sabihin nun, gusto natin, if we prepare a TOS, ang gusto ng test constructor or constructor ay ma-distribute, magkaroon ng mga representation or representatives yung mga topics na yon as per the items of the test instrument. All right? So construct validity is another way, which is, or another form of validation technique, which is also embedded, to the content validity. So ang concern natin sa content validity ay the construct. The item should be related to the construct. So what is this construct? When we say construct, it refers to a concept of characteristics that cannot be directly be observed, okay, but can be measured by observing other indicators that are associated with it. So yun yung mga items na sinasabi natin. We are trying to check the construct, that concept, that particular concept, through test items. So are these items related to the construct? So yun yung dapat nating makita, yun yung dapat nating ma-check, kasi dito lalabas how valid our test instrument is. Okay? So when we are doing construct validation, it actually evaluates whether a measurement tool really represent the things that we are interested in measuring. It is the central to establishing overall validity of a method. It is all about ensuring that the method of measurement matches to construct we want to measure. All right. So an example for this is if you develop a questionnaire of which the main purpose is to diagnose students' attitudes towards mathematics, you need to know, does the questionnaire really measuring the construct of attitude towards mathematics, or is it actually measuring respondents' practices in learning math, or the way they learn math, or other relevant things about attitudinal perspectives? Alright, so yun yung kailangan nating malaman about how to check the construct of the test instrument, the relation of the items to the construct of the test instrument. Now, to achieve construct validity, you have to ensure, take note, you have to ensure that indicators or measurements are carefully developed based on the relevant existing knowledge. Alright? The questionnaire must include only relevant questions that measure known indicators about attitude towards mathematics. Now, it is determined, take note, that construct validity can be determined by utilizing the split half method. The instrument is divided into two parts. All scores on odd items, this is an example, all scores on odd items are added, while all scores on even items are also summed up. A high validity or a very high validity coefficient based from the two set of data taken from the scores of the respondents would indicate that the instrument has a high construct validity. Take note of that. Kapag malaki daw or high to very high yung kanyang correlation coefficient, um, it means that instrument has a very high construct validity. Now, if necessary, we can also check the criterion validity of our test instrument. Now, when it comes to criterion validity, do the result correspond to a different test of the same thing? All right, I repeat, do the results correspond to a different test of the same thing? So in this case, we'll be having several set of, or two sets, or maybe three sets of test instrument. Under this criterion validity, we can establish concurrent validity, all right, concurrent validity and the predictive validity. So when we say concurrent validity, does the test relate to an existing similar measurement? Let's say, for example, we want to conduct a research study, and in our research study, we are checking, we want to find out the pre-test performance of our students and the post-test performance of our students, and take note that when we are conducting administering a pre-test post-test design or pre-test post-test type of exam, we'll be having two similar measurements, two similar test instruments. And how do we know, how do we check if these two measurements are really similar? Kasi since this is pre-test and post-test, we need to make sure that these two exams or two test instruments are equivalent in nature. So how do we know that these two are equivalent? It is by simply checking the concurrent validity of the two test instruments. We will be administering the two exams, the pre-test and the post-test exams in the same day, or maybe same time to the same respondents. And after which the scores of the two respondents to the scores of the two set of respondents will be correlated. All right. If again the result of the correlation analysis will give you a high to very high correlation index, it means there exists a concurrent validity between these two test instruments that you have prepared. Ang ibig sabihin nun, they are similar, all right? They are parallel tests. So in that way, pwede mong gamitin itong dalawang instrument mo. Yung first instrument will serve as your pre-test. Yung second instrument will serve as your post-test. Now, what is the main reason why we want these two tests to be parallel, or to make them similar? Kasi when in the perspective of research, kapag same, totally equal, totally same yung content, ang ibig sabihin nun, yung contents nila, ang ibig sabihin nun, there might be a factor that will occur after in the post test, kasi ang possibility is the recalling. Okay, baka yung mga students ninyo, they instead of analyzing the items, ang gagawin na lang nila during that post test is to recall what has been given during their pre-test. So yun yung possibility, and that might be a factor. It will not give you a reliable result in terms of the analysis of the students in the items given to that test instrument, which is the post-test. Okay, so ang gusto natin, ibahin yung post-test items in terms of the arrangement, in terms of questioning, pero make sure they have yung pre-test and post-test ninyo should have the same competencies, should test same competencies. Alright? So yun yung gusto kong tandaan ninyo when it comes to concurrent validity. Now, another type of criterion validity is the predictive validity. Please be guided with the question, does the test predict later performance on a related criterion? So predictive validity will be checked if you have an instrument and administered this test instrument twice, all right, administered it twice. So maybe for this month you will administer this exam. After a year you will again administer this exam with different respondent. then the results of the two exam or the two administration of the exam will be correlated. All right. So if you have given how do we correlate the two exam? It is through the Pearson product moment correlation coefficient, or formula. So if the result will give you a high to very high correlation index, then automatic there is a high predictive validity on our test instrument. Now, take note, isa lang yung test instrument natin dyan, pero we will administer this test instrument twice, with a long time interval, or in a certain period of time after the respondents measured their skills, value, or attitude. So ito yung gagawin natin when we want to check predictive validity. So there will be two sets of scores, score of the first group, score of the second group, pero itong dalawang group nito, they took the same exam. So this is all about validity. Now, there are factors that could possibly influence the validity of our test instrument. Unclear direction is one. All right. So directions that do not clearly indicate how to respond to the task and how to record the responses tend to reduce the validity. Note that direction that are not clearly stated as to how students respond to the item and record their answers will tend to lessen the validity of the test. This is according to ASAAD 2004. So make sure that your test direction or instruction should clearly defined, should clearly presented. Okay? So yun yung gusto nating it should be specific and direct to the point. Kapag hindi direct to the point, the possibility is the direction will be misleading, and students might mislead, and it will cause wrong answers. It will cause omission on these items, kasi hindi na nila alam kung ano yung gagawin nila, kasi in the first place from the direction, it is very vague. Okay, it is very vague, so na-mislead na sila, hindi na nila alam kung ano yung ginagawa nila. So make sure that our direction should be simplified, should be simple, or stated in simple way, and should be direct to the point. Another factor that a test instrument may lessen its validity is the use of vocabulary words and the use of sentence structure. Make sure that in the items that you are giving to your students for that particular exam, make sure to use simple words. Alright, do not use complex words, kasi ang possibility itong complex word, ito na yung magiging exam ng mga bata, as to how to understand these words that you are presenting to them in the exam. So yun na yung naging yung rason kung bakit ka nagbigay ng exam sa kanila, as to how to understand the words that you are presenting in the test item. So that should not be. If your intention is to check their knowledge, okay, on that particular skill, on that particular lesson, so do not to at least lessen or to increase the validity of that item, we need to simplify our wordings. We need to simplify our vocabulary. Make or use simple vocabulary words. Do not use complex vocabulary words. And make sure yung mga sentence structure ninyo, okay, is maganda. So vocabulary and sentence structure are too complicated for students, would result in the assessment of reading comprehension, thus altering the meaning of assessment result. Vocabulary and sentence structure, according to ASAAD 2004, that do not match the level of the students will result in the test of measuring reading comprehension or intelligence rather than what it intend to measure. Okay, and the third factor that we need to consider also when we are constructing test instrument is the ambiguity of the items. Now, take note that ambiguous statement in an assessment task contribute to misinterpretation or confusion on the part of the students. Ambiguity sometimes confuses better students more than it does to the poor student. So ito yung gusto mo ipagawa sa kanila, pero yung instruction mo very ambiguous. So hindi na nila ma-interpret na totally yung gusto mong ipagawa sa kanila. So that is ambiguous statement or ambiguity. So that will be a factor to contribute in the decrease of validity of our classroom test or classroom exam. All right. Next, number 4, inadequate time limits. So when we say inadequate time limits that do not provide students with enough time to consider the task and provide thoughtful responses can reduce the validity of interpretation of the results. Rather than measuring what a student knows or able to do in a given topic, given adequate time, the assessment may become a measure of speed which the student can respond. All right. For some contents, speed may be important. However, most assessment of achievement should minimize the effects of speed on student performance. So make sure that you give enough time in taking the exam. Okay? Kasi that might also be a factor. Pag nakulangan ng oras, ang ibig sabihin, they will no longer answer or they can no longer continue answering the exam, and you cannot get a reliable result as to the meaning or the characteristic of that particular student on, or maybe you can no longer get information from your respondents or reliable information from your respondents in terms of their performances or achievement on that particular lesson or course. Another one is test items inappropriate for outcomes being measured. So validity pa rin yan. Attempting to measure understanding, thinking skills, or other complex types of the achievement with test form that are appropriate only for measuring factual knowledge will invalidate the result. Ang ibig sabihin nitong number 5 is if yung mga test formats natin. If itong test formats is not really fitted to check skills, all right, to check skills or complex type of achievement or measure of understanding, ito yung ginamit mo, ang ibig sabihin nun, it invalidates the results of the assessment. Kasi in the first place, hindi valid yung test format na ginawa mo in checking that particular skill. So anong gagawin mo? You need to revise the exam and make sure that the test that you will be giving to them is fitted on the outcomes being measured. Okay? So mga test formats natin which will be discussed later are multiple choice type of test, identification type of test, essay type of test. We can also give performance test or product test. So sa sino kaya sa mga ito or alin sa mga ito ang pwede nating ibigay as the exam of of our students for you to be able to check a particular skill or a knowledge. Okay? Next, number 6, poorly constructed test items. Test items that are unintentionally provide clues to the answer will tend to measure students' alertness in detecting clues and the important aspect of students' performance that the test is intended to measure will be affected. This is according to ASAAD 2004. Okay? For number 7, we need to make sure we need to know or to define the level of difficulty of the test items. So when test items are too easy or too difficult, they can no longer discriminate between bright or poor students. Thus, it will lower or lessen the validity of the test. So, make sure na itong mga items mo should not fall from too easy and too difficult. Okay? Ang dapat na pagfulan nila ay nasa moderate difficulty lang yung mga items natin. For you to make sure or for you to be able to discriminate bright and poor students. Kasi yun yung gusto nating makita when we are giving a test, for you to know who are bright groups, who are poor groups, who are groups that really understood your discussion or understand your discussion, and the group who don't understand really the discussion. So yun yung rason naman natin kung bakit tayo nagbibigay ng mga exams, all right? And kapag very easy yan, easy. So lahat ng my students mo can answer, so it can no longer discriminate the group as bright and poor group. Okay? And for the eighth one, length of the test item. A test should have a sufficient number of items to measure what is supposed to measure. If a test is too short to provide a representative sample of the performance that is not to be measured, validity suffer accordingly. This is again from ASAAD 2004. Okay? So if you are constructing, take note, if you are constructing items or questions in your summative exams, make sure to have a more than the required number of items. Say for example, you are planning to give 50 items for your summative examination, and you are doing now the construction of the test. Make sure to have extra items. Okay, extra items. Pwede kang gumawa ng 60. Okay, kasi later on kasi when you will validate it, when you will pilot test it, ang possibility natin or possibility na mangyayari is magkakaroon ng mga rejections on this item. So at least meron kang mga extra pa na pwedeng ibigay sa mga students mo. So the more items, the more valid your test instrument. Okay, so this will be the ninth factor that we need to consider. For the 10th factor, this will talk about identifiable pattern of answers, a systematic pattern of correct answers, and this will lower again the validity of the test. This is according also again to ASAAD 2004. In a multiple choice type of test, it is appropriate to use pattern. Is it appropriate to use pattern on your answers? Is it appropriate to give pattern on the answers, and why? Okay, so of course, placing correct answer in some systematic pattern will enable students to guess. Okay, will enable students to guess the answers to some items more easily, and this will again lower or lessen the validity of that particular test instrument. Okay, so these are the 10 important factors that we need to consider when we are talking about validity of the test instrument. For our next lesson, for our next target, or for my next lecture about the second quality, I will be posting another video clip presentation. So thank you for watching, and I hope you've learned a lot, or you've learned information about the first quality that we need to consider in a classroom testing. Okay, so please check to my next video. Thank you again for watching my